Imagine being born a poor farmer, then becoming the most powerful man in Japan. This is the unbelievable story of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack how a literally nameless foot soldier completely defied every single rule of a highly strict feudal society to forge a unified nation. Okay, picture this. The year is 1537. We're right in the thick of the Sengoku period, also known as the Age of Warring States. It's a time of just endless, brutal conflict all across Japan. And right in the middle of all this absolute chaos, down in Owari province, a boy is born into a farming family. But this family isn't just poor. They are staggeringly, desperately poor. We're talking the very bottom of society here. So destitute, they don't even possess a last name. Now, you have to remember that in 16th century Japan, your birth totally dictated your destiny. Society was built around this rigidly structured caste system. You've got the emperor and the aristocratic warlords sitting at the very top, and then way, way down below are your farmers, your artisans, and your merchants. For the son of a peasant foot soldier, you had absolutely zero chance of political success. Moving up the ladder wasn't just highly unlikely, it was considered an absolute impossibility. Okay, let's dive into this. Because to understand Hideyoshi's impossible ascent, you really have to understand this unique phenomenon of the era called Gikokujo. It roughly translates to the low oppressing the high. Because Japan was being ravaged by this century-long civil war, the traditional rules and rigid social structures were finally starting to shatter. This chaotic social upheaval and constant warfare created the rare, incredibly bloody conditions that could, just maybe, allow a peasant to subvert the rigid caste system and seize power through sheer ambition and talent. Driven by that very ambition, young Hideyoshi actually leaves his village to seek his fortune. In 1558, he seeks out one of the most powerful and ruthless warlords in all of Japan, Oda Nobunaga. Now, Nobunaga was a terrifying figure, famous for his military brilliance and having basically zero mercy. But Hideyoshi didn't enter Nobunaga's ranks as some fierce armored samurai. Nope, he entered at the absolute bottom. His very first job, a lowly sandal bearer. As you can imagine, his origins made him a massive target. He wasn't blessed with the refined looks, the height, or the aristocratic pedigree of his peers. His rivals mocked him ruthlessly. Nobunaga himself gave him these degrading nicknames like Monkey and Bald Rat. And the other aristocratic warlords, they completely dismissed him as nothing more than a jumped-up little peasant. But Hideyoshi was about to prove that his mind was far sharper than any samurai's sword. Hideyoshi basically rose through the ranks by mastering exactly what traditional samurai ignored. For one, he utilized strategic empathy. Legend actually has it that he won Nobunaga's absolute trust simply by warming his master's sandals inside his own clothing on a freezing winter day. Simple but brilliant. On the battlefield, he favored subversion. He'd much rather negotiate with enemy generals and flip their loyalties than waste lives in brutal, drawn-out sieges. And when forced to fight, his tactics were wildly innovative. Take the 1567 siege of Inabayama Castle. Hideyoshi devises this bold commando raid, sneaking his men in to open the gates from the inside, securing a massive victory for Nobunaga. Fast forward to 1582. This is the devastating midpoint crisis of our story. Hideyoshi is now a trusted, top-tier military general. His master, Oda Nobunaga, is on the very verge of finally uniting Japan and bringing all the warring daimyo to heel. Traveling through Kyoto, Nobunaga decides to stop at a temple with minimal protection just to host a tea gathering. He thinks he is totally safe. He is dead wrong. In the dead of night, the Honnoji temple was completely surrounded, but it wasn't an enemy clan attacking. It was an unexpected, treasonous ambush by one of Nobunaga's own trusted lieutenants, a man named Akechi Mitsuhide. Mitsuhide redirects his massive army, traps Nobunaga inside the temple walls, and sets the whole place ablaze. "The enemy is at Honnoji." That was Mitsuhide's chilling battle cry. With absolutely no escape and the temple literally burning around him, Oda Nobunaga committed seppuku, ritual suicide. Just like that, the most powerful man in Japan was dead. In an instant, the progress of unification was shattered, and Japan was violently plunged right back into a terrifying power vacuum. And what's really interesting about this slide is Hideyoshi's reaction. When the news of the betrayal reached him, he was hundreds of miles away, actively fighting the Mori clan. But in a display of mind-blowing tactical genius, he immediately negotiates a peace treaty with his current enemies, turns his massive army around, and marches at a breakneck pace back to Kyoto. He confronts and completely slaughters Mitsuhide's forces at the Battle of Yamazaki. He avenged his master in a mere 13 days. This lightning-fast strike positioned the former peasant to take total control of Nobunaga's legacy. Let's move to and see how this builds. Because the speed of his ascent represents some of the most mind-bending class mobility in human history. Look at this. From a nameless peasant in 1537 to a sandal-bearer in 1558. By the 1570s, he's a feared general. And then the climax. In 1585, Hideyoshi actually maneuvers the emperor into appointing him Kampaku, or imperial regent. Now, this was a title historically reserved strictly for the elite aristocrats of the Fujiwara clan. He even had a Fujiwara noble adopt him just to make it legal. A peasant was now officially ruling Japan. To maintain this newfound power, Hideyoshi knew he needed more than just swords. He had to master culture. So he enlisted the legendary tea master Senryokyu. Together, they started hosting exclusive chanoyu, or tea gatherings. Hideyoshi brilliantly transformed this tranquil Zen practice into high-stakes political theater. Cosseted inside these tiny, secluded tea rooms, powerful warlords drank from priceless ceramics while secretly forging alliances and negotiating massive deals for Portuguese muskets and gunpowder, far away from prying eyes. By 1590, the impossible was achieved. Through sheer military genius, ruthless ambition, and master-level political manipulation, conquering holdouts like the Hojo clan, the century-long civil war was finally over. The former peasant had completely unified a broken Japan. And to cement his legacy and project this aura of absolute invincibility across the nation, he built the magnificent, towering Osaka Castle. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate tragic irony of this entire story. Hideyoshi had benefited entirely from the chaos of Gogo-Jojo to rise to the top. But once he was in power, he slammed the door shut right behind him. In 1588, he initiated the sword hunt, basically confiscating all weapons from the peasantry. Then, in 1591, he issued an edict strictly freezing all social classes. If you were born a farmer, you died a farmer. If you were a warrior, you stayed a warrior. Combined with sweeping nationwide land surveys to establish economic control, he ensured that no other peasant could ever rise up to challenge his supremacy. But, of course, absolute power cannot defeat mortality. In 1598, Toyotomi Hideyoshi's remarkable life came to an end. He passed away, leaving his monumental, hard-fought legacy in incredibly fragile hands. His only heir, his son, Hideyori, was just 5 years old. To protect the boy, Hideyoshi had established a council of 5 elders to rule in his place until the child came of age. But as you can imagine, a council of ambitious warlords is a very dangerous, fragile thing. So, the crucial point is, almost immediately, that council collapsed into infighting. One of those elders, Tokugawa Ieyasu, seized the opportunity. By 1600, at the Battle of Sekigahara, Ieyasu took absolute power. And by 1615, he completely extinguished the Toyotomi bloodline at the Siege of Osaka. Hideyoshi's physical dynasty was wiped out. Yet, the administrative foundations, the rigid social structure, and the unified nation that Hideyoshi built, those survived. His reforms directly paved the way for the Tokugawa shogunate and 268 years of unprecedented peace. It's a story of unparalleled ambition, tactical genius, and deep irony. A man who started with nothing, gained the entire country, only to ensure no one could ever follow in his footsteps. It leaves us to wonder, could anyone else have achieved what Hideyoshi did? Think about the sheer willpower required to bend history to your whim like that. If you enjoyed this explainer, subscribe to History Dominion for more cinematic stories about the greatest leaders, battles, and empires in history.